Good evening and welcome to Live with Colledge. Let me tell you, we are in for a treat tonight. I am so excited to have Bob McCullough, Dean of Undergraduate Admission at Case Western Reserve University, joining us to share a little bit about how to think about waitlists and how they're used in admissions. Tonight's broadcast is part of our College Admissions Literacy Series, which is a series that's dedicated to bringing students and parents better information about higher education and better access to college admissions. I'm Jenny Umhofer, owner and founder of Colledge, and we have an exciting conversation ahead of us tonight. It's been quite a year in admissions, and we know how many families are feeling that sort of already complex process has become even harder to get right. So parents and students feel that the stakes are high. And so our purpose here tonight is to help you learn about one component that may come into play in your child's admissions process from an admissions perspective. So first, a couple of little housekeeping notes before we get started. This session is being recorded and we'll send you the recording out to all of you. So we encourage you to just be present. And if you're happening across our live stream on Facebook or YouTube, and would like the recording sent to you, we're gonna put the Eventbrite link into the comments box now. Just please take a second to fill out the form so you get your copy sent to you. Also, please hit like if you're finding this useful so we know how we're doing. And finally, I want to encourage all of you to please feel free to just pop in any questions into the comments box as we go. I will keep track of your questions and we'll have some time for Q&A at the very end of tonight's event. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our panelists to join the stream. First, I want to invite and introduce Kelsey Tarosian, our Director of Admission Services here at Colledge. Hi, Kelsey.
Hi, Jenny.
And next, I want to introduce Bob McCullough, Dean of Undergraduate Admission at Case Western Reserve. Hi, Bob. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Great to have you.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening who don't know Bob yet, Bob McCullough was appointed Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Case Western Reserve University in 2009, and now he's the Dean. And he has more than 15 years of experience in university admissions, much of it at Case Western Reserve, and then having previously served the university as Director of Marketing and Communications, among other positions. He also served as Dean of Admission at Ursinus College in Collegeville, Pennsylvania. Bob holds a Bachelor of Art in English and an MBA, both from Case Western Reserve. So I'm really looking forward to listening to this conversation. So let's get right to it.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Well, so Bob, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So for anyone who is yet unfamiliar with Case Western Reserve University, it's one of those gems of an institution located right in the heart of Cleveland, Ohio, and what I think I've actually heard you describe as one of the most culturally dense square miles, basically anywhere. And it's a university, it's one of those unique ones that was born out of the marriage of two different universities. And so it has a lot of strengths in different areas, has a lot to offer many different kinds of students, from strengths in the performing arts to its really famed strength in STEM. Case is a school that really has it all. So tell us a little bit more about Case Western and what your typical student profile looks like, Bob.
Certainly, yeah. So Case Western Reserve, I appreciate your nod to our history. That's one of the things when we mention the name of the university, it's a mouthful, Case Western Reserve University, and doesn't always fit neatly across a sweatshirt. So, but it's an important kind of sort of factor in thinking about who we are as an institution and our heritage, kind of owing to the Case side, which was the science and engineering, and then Western Reserve College, which was a liberal arts school. So today, major research institution. Our faculty are outstanding teachers and also scholars in their own right. And creating knowledge and asking really hard questions and wrestling with that new information. We're an institution that has 4 undergraduate schools and colleges, So we have the engineering, the liberal arts and sciences, and then we have a school of management and a school of nursing, plus professional schools and medicine and law and dental medicine and applied social science. So as you say, a whole bunch of different things going on there. And one of the things that I really like about Case Western Reserve is that when students apply to the university, they're actually applying to the university. They don't have to pick a school or a college or a program, but instead they're admitted through one door to the entire university. So, when you think about who our students are, a lot of them are ones who may have something that they're really excited about. And that might be biomedical engineering, or that might be anthropology. But then they also have other interests, and they like to be able to kind of pursue multiple different pathways at once. So it's not uncommon for our students to be pre-med, but also be an art history major, or to do accounting and then be doing music as a second major or as a minor. So that kind of interdisciplinary thinking, or kind of crossing over some of the traditional boundaries, is something that I think our students really enjoy, and it's something that we really like about our students. Are very interesting.
Wow. Makes me want to go back to college again. Actually, I love those. I love hearing about the interdisciplinary stories of it. I think such a great way to think about education, that you can't just look at a problem through one lens. You have to be able to look at it through multiple lenses. And the idea of layering all of those subjects is just great. Any little things that you notice over the years about the typical student that tends to do really, really well at Case Western?
Yeah, so I think in addition to that idea of having kind of breadth to your interests, one of the things about us as a kind of student population is that our students tend to have an unusual amount of focus. So a lot of students who know a direction that they want to go. That might be a very hyper-specific direction about the exact kind of PhD program that they hope to pursue after graduation. It might be something a little bit more broadly, that they know they want to work in nonprofit, or they want to work in something related to healthcare. But they tend to have a lot of focus. And one of the things that our students encounter when they come to Case Western Reserve is that there are a lot of opportunities for them to get to work right away. 99% of our students say that they do some type of experiential learning before they graduate. Wow. So those are things like being involved in research with these great faculty members, or doing an internship over the summer, or even during the school year that's really kind of fostered by being in an urban location like Cleveland. Being able to have an international experience, getting into the clinical setting if you're a nursing student or sort of interested in healthcare, some of those fields, and certainly the service learning. So all of those different opportunities that so many of our students are interested in when they're exploring colleges. It's not just about this is something that I might do. It's something that virtually all of our students do. And so those kind of characteristics of being not only kind of focused, but also willing to work. Our students they want to roll up their sleeves, and they want to get to work, and they want to seek out these opportunities and find them right away. And those are the kinds of things that I think then lead to the great success of our students going off to get jobs, or go on to medical school or law school, or start a new company, or whatever it might be, because they've been able to really sort of get their hands dirty and practice what they're learning throughout their undergraduate education.
Amazing. So much to offer. Such a great school. We could, I'm sure, have a whole talk about that all night. But let's get to the topic at hand, which is, of course, waitlists. So, I just want to give a nod to all of the students out there who may be listening, who may be on a waitlist right now. And getting waitlist decisions can be really hard. And the single most important piece of advice I think I can give anyone out there who's on a waitlist is honestly deposit somewhere that you have been accepted. And let me tell you why. First of all, on average, US colleges admit maybe 20% of all students who accept placement on a waitlist. But beyond that, 71% of those colleges admit less than 10% of their waitlisted students, and around 57% of those colleges admit actually less than 5%. Not 5 students, but 5%. So while waitlists offer hope, they are not a yes. And so you want to have a spot to go to in the fall. So if you haven't accepted an offer yet, I want to encourage anyone in that situation to do so now, because you don't want to lose your spot and find yourself without a college to go to in the fall. Once you have deposited, if there is still a waitlist that you're really crossing your fingers for, it's also important to understand how waitlists work and understand that there's kind of a secret to waitlists. And once you know that secret, you'll better understand how to take control of your situation. So just to kind of frame how waitlists work from an institutional perspective, every year college admissions offices basically play a game that we at Colledge like to call too many, too few, where colleges can't actually accept too many students. Quite literally, they only have so many beds. They only have so many classroom spaces. And there are, of course, other budgetary decisions that limit schools to a maximum number of first-year students. And no college wants to accept too few students because tuition dollars are, pretty important, too important to pass up. So what do? They almost always admit fewer students with their initial round of acceptances, undershooting their admit targets, knowing they're going to end up with too few. And that's kind of where waitlists come in. So Bob, I would love to hear you explain a little bit about the role of waitlists in enrollment management and why they're so important from an institutional perspective, and particularly at CASE.
Yeah, absolutely, Kelsey. So I think this idea of kind of too many, too few, sometimes students and families might not realize that when colleges make offers of admission, we're making a little bit of a guess about how many and which students will actually accept our offers of admission. It isn't always the case that if we offer a student admission, that we can predict with great certainty the likelihood that that student says yes back to us. Right. And I actually think this is one of the things about college admissions that students often don't appreciate or don't realize how much kind of power and control they actually do have in the process. Mm-hmm. So when we kind of go through the admission process, students get to say yes twice for every time that the college says yes. They say yes to applying, and then the college decides whether to say yes to offer admission, and then the student decides whether to say yes from among their different offers of admission. Right. And so when we admit students, we know that they have other choices, but we don't know what those other choices are, and we don't know what's going to be important to that student in that moment when they're making their decisions. And of course, there's all kinds of different factors that come into play for any one individual student. It might be that they're deciding that being closer to home is more important to them come decision day. It might be that scholarship dollars are more important to them come decision day. It might be that when they initially applied to colleges, they had an idea of a particular academic focus in mind. And over the months in between when they applied and when they actually had to make a decision, those ambitions have changed. They shifted. Yep. So all of those things, you're a high school students who are learning and evolving and growing and changing all the time. And so that can impact the likelihood of accepting an offer of admission. So we have pretty sophisticated ways of guessing how many and which students might accept an offer of admission from us. But those guesses are only as good as the historical data on which they're based. Right. And when conditions change in a year, so let's go back a year, right? Conditions changed pretty dramatically, right? Yeah. It was really hard to predict what was going to happen. So the wait list gives us that flexibility. And as you say, many of us, in Case Western Reserve included, we're going to make our offers of admission a little conservatively, because if our guesses are on target and the number of students accept their offer that we expect, great. That means that we can admit students from our wait list and be able to come in on target. If our guesses are a little off and more students accept their offer of admission, we're covered because we were a little conservative. We made room for that. Right. And if it's the other direction, then we just were able to admit a few more students from the wait list. But that kind of flexibility is really important to us when we're making our offers of admission, guessing what might happen, and then kind of getting to the date that students have to confirm. being able to make some adjustments so that our class comes in where we hope it's going to be.
Right. Yeah. So speaking of, confirmation, having May 1st, the national decision deadline, just having passed, now is about the time that we might start to see some movement on waitlists. And I'm curious to hear what drives the decision on the institutional side, especially at Case Western, to make students offers who opted into the waitlist.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me reflect too on something that you mentioned earlier, which is that it's hard. And I if you're one of those students who's sitting out there on the wait list at schools that you really like and you really want to be able to study at that institution, and you're kind of sitting there in limbo, that's tough. Yeah. And so, and this might, if there are juniors or underclass students who are listening to this session, that may come your way, and it's really hard not to feel as though that was a rejection, right, being offered a place on the wait list. The reality, though, is that when we are making our admission decisions, it's not a case where we sort of think about who are all the best students and we rank them from 1 to 33,197, and then we can accept 7,400. And so if you're 7,401, you were almost as good, but you're on the wait list. It's not like that at all. In fact, the way that it works is that we have this big pool of applicants and we have our group of admitted students. And ultimately that group becomes the entering class, but it isn't one monolithic pool of applicants or admitted students or enrolling students. It's a whole bunch of different little pools. Mm-hmm. So we think about all kinds of factors that go into how we want to build a class. And when we're doing that, we might have things like the distribution of majors, or we might have factors like sort of balancing out gender, or sort of thinking about geographic diversity or other kinds of things. So when we're looking at the students who have accepted their offers of admission, we might have some uneven patterns. Maybe we admitted students in engineering this particular year, and a higher proportion of them accepted their offer of admission than anticipated. So we might not be able to admit students from the waitlist for engineering. Right. But maybe in the School of Management, we had fewer students than expected, and there's room there. And so we can offer more students who might be interested in that particular field. So just as one kind of illustration, but all of these things, there's so many things that are important to colleges when we're building our classes, ranging from academic programs to sort of demographic kinds of factors, to even sort of making the dollars work, and thinking about how we can spend our financial aid dollars to encourage students to be able to access a school like Case Western Reserve. And if we have the funding available, maybe we can admit some more students who need a lot of money. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, maybe we're in a position where we don't have as much room on that side. And so students who don't need as much money might have a better advantage in coming off the wait list. And all of those things are things that we just don't know until we hear back. We make the offer, we hear back, then we can kind of see what the composition of the class looks like, and kind of where those opportunities might be to make some students happy and make an offer of admission.
Great. I think that's really helpful, and I really appreciate kind of you elucidating a little bit more of the entire process, because I think students really do make that understandable misconception that it's all this one big pool and you putting all of the students in a big line and that's it, and there's so many other factors that go into play here. So thinking about waitlists historically, I'm curious to hear about the changes. You kind of mentioned COVID-19 and how much that's changed everything. So I would love to hear a little bit of a kind of contrast, how Case has used its waitlist historically. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think I read that last year you guys offered just over around 10,000 student spots on the waitlist, and around 5,600 ended up accepting. So I'd love to hear about if that's accurate and what you might notice about the waitlist being different this year, if it is.
Yeah, certainly. So So every year when, and this is pretty common, typically when universities, Case Western Reserve as well as other institutions, when we offer a student a place on the wait list, there's going to be a percentage of students that say, no, I'm good. I've got another choice that I'm really happy with. And they're not going to further engage from there. And that might be somewhere around half, maybe a little bit more in a given year, maybe a little bit less in a given year, but somewhere in that neighborhood will either accept their offer of admission or accept a place on the wait list, or say, no, I'm good. I'm going to move on to some other choices here. The thing that I think is really interesting too is that every year is so different. A few years ago, we offered a pretty substantial, similar kind of numbers, but maybe a little bit lower scale, a place on the wait list. Maybe about half of them accepted a place. So, 4,000-ish or 4,500-ish students who were interested. And we couldn't admit anybody from the wait list. And that was a highly unusual year for us, because typically we're sort of pursuing the pathway where we've admitted conservatively and we're able to then admit students from the wait list to kind of round out the class. That particular year, we couldn't do it. Our offers of admission, students were responding in a much more positive way than we had expected, than we had anticipated. And part of that was sort of these other environmental factors that we can't really predict. So in that year, it turned out that many of our competitors had admitted more students through early decision. We didn't know this at the time, but we found, right? It's sort of the Monday morning quarterbacking. And so the admission regular decision was a lot more competitive. And so suddenly there were a lot of students that we had offered admission to who didn't have the same choices as they might have had a year before.
Yeah.
And a higher proportion of them then said yes to Case Western Reserve. I don't think it was because of the Cleveland Cavaliers winning an NBA championship and breaking the championship drought. And Cleveland, but that's right. You never know. And so last year, obviously, with when we had made our offers of admission, it was right about the time that that kind of the COVID and the pandemic and sort of lockdowns were starting, and we kind of accounted for some uncertainty there, but obviously not enough. And so we had to admit many more students from the wait list. Mm-hmm. And even then, there was a lot of uncertainty about how big should the first year class be? How much should we bring it down because of concerns about sort of population density on campus and all these other things. Yeah. So that was an unusual year in many ways. But I think the point is that each year, it can be a little bit different, and the variance of how many students might get offered a place from the wait list. We were making adjustments from year to year. The schools that we overlap with for students applying are making adjustments from year to year. We may have a school that we have significant overlap with who suddenly has an influx of a major donor who gives a big gift that allows them to do something different with scholarships and financial aid.
Right.
That we feel that changes.
There are a lot of factors that are kind of coming into play and changing wait lists from year to year. Yep. Is there any big differences you're noticing about this year's wait list?
I mean, I would say that what we don't know right now is that as our students have responded to their offers of admission, we don't know whether we're going to be able to admit students from the wait list. Mm-hmm. We're feeling like it's a little bit tighter, like we might not be able to admit many students from the wait list. And part of that speculation is again just about that adjustment from year to year, that perhaps other schools and the schools that we overlap with in the space, maybe they did a little bit more early decision, maybe and those are the questions that we don't yet know the answer to about where things are going to go from here. I think that many folks may be familiar with the test optional change and how that really impacted applicant pools nationally who hadn't been test optional before. And there were lots of schools that were test optional before, But this year, the vast majority of institutions moved to at least a temporary or a pilot test optional policy. And so a lot of applicant pools at, very competitive, very selective schools increased pretty dramatically. Anytime that you have a big change like that, you have a 10% increase in applications or a 40% increase in applications, you introduce this uncertainty. And the whole thing about waitlists is trying to manage volatility and uncertainty and account for it. And so now there's even more, because that was a pretty substantial factor that impacted our applicant pool. We had about almost a 15% increase in applications this year, and probably test optional was a big part of that. But also, I think the uncertainty that students have, they're looking at what their upper class friends and what their outcomes and what their decisions might have looked like before. They're reading the newspapers, they're reading the online content, they're hearing and saying, gosh, maybe I should apply to that extra school because I'm trying to kind of hedge my bets. And so that's causing applicant pools to go up. And then we're also doing more to reach out and to try to develop and to try to encourage more students to think about our places that might not have found us otherwise. The virtual sessions that we're doing, programs like this, I can talk to you here from my place in Cleveland, and you're there in California, and we can have this conversation. We have people listening from all over the country, all over the world. And that's something that, this pandemic has really kind of ignited the ability of colleges to reach out to different communities and make those connections. And so that has also kind of expanded our reach and caused more students to come into the pool, which again is more uncertainty.
Absolutely. So I think it'll be interesting to see how all of this pans out. I think, as waitlists start to move and some schools start to see, okay, we have some space for waitlists, then there'll be a shuffling act, right? So they may have deposited somewhere, and then they may accept a place on the wait list, which will then open up some other spaces in other places. And another interesting thing to note is that although we're seeing all of these, astronomical rises in application numbers at many, many different schools, from 10, 15% all the way up to 40, 50, 60%, there's only around, I believe, 2.4% more students applying. So that is going to be really an interesting one to see where all of these admit rates kind of land and how these waitlists are used. And I don't think that we're going to really know how different it is until probably the fall or a little bit later, which kind of brings me to my next question, which is, for students who are waiting, when do waitlists normally close? And do you anticipate that changing because of all of this shuffling this year at all?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that is going to be challenging for students who are on the wait list this year is that, some institutions may say, okay, I feel really good about where my class is sitting right now. But many of them may be reluctant to fully close out the wait list. So in a normal year, under normal conditions, if you get past the deadline of May 1st, or this year, many schools had a May 3rd deadline, and you're feeling like your class is, in really great shape, usually it's nice to have a few more students, because that in just a normal year, you're going to have some students who get in off the wait list at other places, or their plans change, or whatever it might be. So you have a few more students that are committed than you expect to actually show up. This year, so let's say that you feel like you're in the exact right place on, May 4th, Star Wars Day, to be able to say, okay, I've got my class where it's going to be. I'm going to let all these poor kids on the wait list know that it's not going to happen for them, and let them move on. I think this year it's less likely that students will be getting that communication early on from schools, because even if you've got kind of a mix, right? So you've got schools where they know that they have room, and they're going to try to do a little bit of, this is about the time that they're looking in to see, okay, we might have room, but for whom do we have room?
Right.
So I want 1,000 students in the class. I'm at 975. I have theoretically room for 25, but is that 25 students in engineering? Is that 25 students who are low-income students? Is that 25 students who are, coming from Egypt? Whatever,
right.
that you're trying to kind of fill in there. So that's good. That's going to take a little bit of time. But typically, I think, and depending on the school, and we're very conscious of this too. Some institutions have the kind of magnetism and pull to be able to say, whenever it is that they pick up the phone and give you a call, or that they reach out to you and say, hey, we think we might have a spot for you, they're feeling pretty confident that students are going to accept their offer. That's not to say that we purposefully would delay any of those decisions, because the sooner that we can wrap up our classes, the better it is, the sooner that we can get students connected with the resources they need for onboarding and everything else. But sometimes, if you're being really careful and it's a very small number of students that you might be going for, and it's a very specific set of characteristics that you're looking for, you might be really poring over and essentially kind of re-reviewing those applications. If you're looking for a lot of students, maybe you're reaching out a lot quicker. Yeah. And maybe even you started reaching out before the deadline, before the May 1st or May 3rd deadline, right? But even I think those schools where you're feeling like you're in pretty good shape, and I would probably characterize us that way, we're feeling like we're in pretty good shape. A couple big questions. One is going to be, will there be a lot of waitlist activity at other institutions? And as you say, we live in an ecosystem. So if this school takes students, then this school is going to lose students, and then this school is going to lose, and it's a whole trickle-down effect, and off we go. The other thing that I think is a big unknown factor is, we have a substantial number of international students, right? And international students this year have, and for the last 14 months, have been in a really tough spot because not only travel difficulties, but also just being able to get their visas. The consular offices and the embassies have been closed, so they haven't been able to get their visas. We hope that students are able to get to campus this fall. We don't yet know. And so if there's a whole bunch of students who can't get to campus, maybe some institutions are going to have a little bit more room, and that might be later on in the summer. So all of that is a way of saying, hang in there, because we just, we don't know. And there's a lot about that the universe has yet to tell us.
Yeah, there's just a lot of factors and more. I think there always are, as we've been saying, but this year it's kind of, I told a student the other day, it's like admissions got put into a jar and shaken up and then turned upside down, and we don't know how it's going to settle. And so there's a lot changing. So keep your eye on, just keep your finger right on the pulse of it. Stay closely connected if you're on a wait list, and we've got our fingers crossed for you for sure. So I want to be mindful of time, but I want to give you an opportunity, Bob, to, for the students listening who are on waitlist now, what advice would you offer them?
Yeah, well, I think what you led with about making sure that you have a home, that's important, because as much as we are optimistic, and I can tell you that this is the time that we've begun to kind of go through some of those students who are on our wait list, and you look at them and you're like, student's amazing. Like, I would love to have this student on campus. I can't believe that we're not there yet. So I know, that there's so many great students out there, and just making sure that you have a spot that you can start to get excited about and you can feel good about. That's really important. But specific to kind of the wait list and sort of where you go from here, the first step is just to make sure that whatever the mechanism that school has asked of you, that you're doing that thing. So maybe that means there's an online form that they're asking you to fill out. Maybe there's something that you have to send back in the mail. Maybe there's, whatever it is. And with us, we actually reach out multiple times to students to ask them to update us on their status and sort of, are you still interested, or have you moved on? Because again, over time, we know that your choices change and what you think is important changes. And, we might have been at the top of your list on April 5th, but by May 5th, perhaps, you've moved on. Right. So, we're checking in with you. If you're interested in that school, whatever their mechanism is to make sure that you can raise your hand and you've officially made that known, do that. Mm-hmm. I think that the other thing that's important to think about is this is a human process. So even at schools that have large applicant pools and are dealing with large wait lists or whatever it might be, it's still a human process. Mm-hmm. So I'm constantly talking with and dialoguing with my team and my admission counselors who are connecting with students, and they're still advocating for students. They're saying, hey, is there any way that we can find a spot for this student? So if you haven't made contact, many schools have kind of a structure where there's an admission counselor who might be assigned to your school or your territory, your region. It's not a bad idea just to kind of reach out. You don't need to send them, a communication every day or text them or, I don't know, send them knock jokes or whatever, but just to kind of raise your hand and let them know that you're out there and that you're genuinely interested in that particular school. There might be factors that don't allow that school to admit you, but at least then they know you're there, and they know that it's not just you responding to a form. It's that, no, this is a place that you'd really like to be. Mm-hmm. And so because it's a human process, even when things are really, really tight, we have had the opportunity to admit a very small number of students. And, those might be those students that we've been able to kind of have that communication with, and the admission counselor is really able to advocate for that student, and we're able to kind of make it work for them. So so would encourage you to just be in touch with that person. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that you just hit on something so important that so many students don't realize. They see these big institutions and they don't realize that these institutions are full of real people who really care and who are really looking for real, teenagers to come and be on their campus. And I think that, I was talking earlier about how the waitlist works and kind of there being a secret to it. And that's really what it is, which is that, connect with the people that you've been connected with, connect to your regional representative and let them know you're there. Part of it is, as we've been talking about, kind of a numbers game. You're trying to fill your class. So you want to admit people that off the wait list that meet all of the criteria that you need for shaping your class, but who also you think are going to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, it's that sort of keeping it within the admission office. I would recommend that too, because, as you think about, come back to that idea that, you weren't almost over the bar, right? So we don't need typically new letters of recommendation. We don't need you to send us, your most recent achievement that you got, that your perfect attendance for the third quarter, and sort of kind of reaching around to other people at the university who might, you're really interested in being a physics major and contacting the physics faculty. They're typically not equipped to be able to kind of work with you or make something happen for you, right?
Yeah.
Go with the admission office. That's our job. We're here to kind of help you, and we want to be able to be as available and to make those connections for you. Again, it might not work out, but that's the best place to really kind of start and end those conversations.
Fantastic advice. And so with that, I'm gonna bring Jenny back into the stream and open it up for some questions. Hey, Jenny.
Hi, thank you so much, Bob. This has been such a fantastic conversation about the wait list. I loved what you said about this being a human process. And I also I wanted to ask you, actually, I'm going to open it up for questions too, but I wanted to ask you if students are, on a wait list and maybe they're not sure how to reach out or what to say when they reach out, would it be advisable to maybe reach out to their counselor at their high school or a counselor that they're working with and have the counselor reach out to the admissions office? Would that be something you would advise, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's always good to be, I think, mindful of who is around you and supporting you in the process, and being able to kind of connect and sort of make it known to those people that are around you. It's not always the case that there's something specific that they can do for you, or that they can, kind of, sometimes I think families and students may think that, because we have great relationships with counselors, whether they're school-based or independent counselors, that, there's a magic handshake or something that we have. But at the same time, there's a level of perspective, I think, often that the people around you, your counselors, your teachers, adults in your life might be able to help you with. And some of that might be good advice about kind of how you might approach this reaching out to a college. Some of that might be good advice about, maybe it's time to think about, that other choice that you're really, that it's time to start getting excited about that other choice and sort of making steps in that direction. But we're all in this together, and nobody's doing it alone. So the more that you kind of have some of those people around you who can kind of help you, help you through that process, the better off you're going to be.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah, that's really helpful. I really appreciate your answer there. I think students feel so stressed and so worried when they get put on a wait list, or what's appropriate, what's not. So this has been incredibly helpful to just take a breath, and try to sort through, what's the right thing to do for you. So we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can right now. And I invite you, if you have more questions or if you need more help, please reach out to us directly. We're going to give you the link to contact us at Colledge right now in the chat, in the comments box. And if you have questions or you're interested in learning more about Case Western Reserve University, we're going to pop that contact into the comments box as well. Bob was very, very generous to spend time with us tonight, and he's available for other questions should you have, more thoughts after this live session. So I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask you right off. So you had mentioned earlier in the talk about, sort of specific different types of programs at Case that you will be thinking about sort of numbers for. Are there specific programs at Case that are particularly impacted or would be helpful for students like that are juniors or sophomores to know about, that might just be a little bit more competitive or a little bit harder to, to get into?
Yeah, so, it's a little bit of a paradox, because when we are admitting students, I mentioned, we're admitting students through one door. So there's not a different admissions process for the engineer versus the accountant. But at the same time, there is a degree of, the shape of our applicant pool is a little bit different. And so, and I don't think it's unusual that we may have more students who express an interest in, medicine, sort of pre-med students. And, we're surrounded by hospitals. We have a top 25 medical school that's part of Case Western Reserve, the Cleveland Clinic, right next door to us. So all of these different kinds of things that make us a little bit more popular for something like students who are interested in pre-med, or computer science, is another one. But, when I say that, I think that the takeaway isn't that we're not looking for pre-med students, or you shouldn't apply to Case Western Reserve if you're a computer science student. Those are fields where they tend to be popular. We have a lot of students who apply, but we're also admitting a lot of students for those fields, because those are things that we do pretty well. Actually, we do everything very well, but those are things that, we're going to be admitting a lot of students who have those kinds of interests. It's just the shape of the pool is such that, you'll see many students kind of with expressing those kinds of interests. So I think one of the things that we think about when we're making offers of admission is kind of that, not just do we think that this is a student who has the kind of foundation for success, but this other question about how is a student going to fit into the community? And we're a place that, really values community. We're a place where a lot of our programs are really known for that idea of team and collaboration and working with other people to solve hard problems. So some of those characteristics can play a big role in the admission decision.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really great advice. That if you are interested in pre-med or some of these other more popular programs, that you should still go ahead and apply, because you don't know. And, it could be the perfect place for you. So I really like that advice. We did have a question come in from our audience, and the question is, would a college ever deny you for reaching out to admissions as mentioned? I think they're referring to the waitlist.
Yeah. So I can answer that very succinctly and say, I can't imagine. When sometimes people ask the sort of question broadly about admissions, what can I do to stand out? And I typically ask for clarification, in a good way or in a not so good way. We wouldn't deny a student who wanted to reach out to us to engage. We might be less excited about a student who, responded to their offer of being on the wait list with, hurling insults to us, and what were we thinking? Right. So that might be somebody that, we might not offer a place from the wait list for. But, we're talking about
that. So don't do that.
Maybe not so much that, or don't talk about our Cleveland Browns. Right. So no, it's, we're here to help. That's our job. And, we spend a lot of time, as much as sometimes the work of anything that involves, dealing with a lot of stress or a lot of volume or a lot of whatever it might be, can cause people's levels of energy to sort of go down, or the sort of birth that they give. We always remind ourselves every day, it's about, understand the place where the person that you're working with is coming from. Mm-hmm. And that the students who are out there on a wait list have a lot of questions. They might be anxious. They just don't know. They've never gone through this process before. They've never applied to college before. Even if they come from a family and they have 3 older siblings who all applied to colleges and went through all kinds of different things, it's still their process. It's still their thing for the first time.
Yes.
And so we're here to be helpful. We're here to answer questions. It might be a question that we've answered 7,000 different times that day, but it's still the first time that we're answering it for that student. And, we keep kind of coming back with that and making sure that our team and our counselors are kind of approaching it with that kind of grace and understanding.
Wonderful. That's so helpful, Bob. Thank you so much. This has been incredible. I can't thank you enough for spending the evening with us. I think that's all the questions we have. And like I said, feel free to reach out to us if you have further questions about our services, and reach out to Bob if you're interested in learning more about Case Western Reserve.
Yeah, and I just want to close out by saying, as a group that's really trying hard to reach as many families as we can, to just provide, more information, better access to college, I want to thank you so much for joining us, Bob, and for sharing so openly about what the process has been this year, what waitlists are all about, and what Case Western Reserve University is looking for. Really, I think it's been invaluable. And I want to thank everybody here for attending tonight. I want to make sure that you're all getting access to all of our wonderful free resources. So please make sure to follow us on social media. And if you felt like tonight was helpful, please consider sharing that content with anyone you think that could benefit. And we're looking forward to seeing you, especially you parents out there, at our next Colledge Talk, which is going to be coming up not this Sunday, but next on Sunday, May 16th at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, entitled Parental developmental units and their place in the admissions process. We're really pleased to have Fran Scoble, who is the former head of school at Westridge School for Girls here in Pasadena, California, where we'll talk about how parents can kind of better support their children during the college application cycle, how much to help, when to dial back, and everything you need to know about your parent, your role as a parent in the college admissions process. So I'm going to pop the link to sign up for tickets for that if you're interested. Remember that these events are free and completely open to the community. And thank you again so much for coming. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Jenny, and everybody. I hope you have a great evening.
Thanks so much, Kelsey.
Night.
Thank you all.